I think there's a quorum here. There's 2 out of the 4.
Yep, we got quorum.
So we got a quorum, so they're late, so I think we can go ahead and start. I mean, and I didn't put anything as far as a chairman or anything, since it's a one-time subcommittee, so
I agree.
whoever wants, do you want me to lead it, or?
Yeah, go. I think that'd be good.
Okay, Ben, I think you've met Miss Boyd before, or Commissioner Boyd.
No, this is the first time we've met.
I thought you
believe.
talked to somebody there. So
I did, a lady.
Oh, there's Miss Kim, I think.
Hello.
So there's Kim.
Nice
So
to meet
there's,
you. We've also got Tony Baker. He's kind of assisting as our kind of obligation coordinator. I'll dive into kind of a separate piece about kind of how we're supporting all of our clients in the final year regarding obligations. And then we've got Kennedy Shannon, who's our Vice President of Long-Term Recovery on as well.
Ben, did you get a copy of the spreadsheet that Jessica sent you? That's where we're seeing where we're at right now on the ARPA.
Let me make sure.
She emailed it this morning.
Right, yeah, I was in some other meeting, so I didn't get a chance, but I will pull it up. And we've got some other trackers and information that we can pull up, and we can easily, very quickly update it with any of this information.
And I think there was a few differences, but I think Kim's going to correct those. It was like $60,000 for Ford Sumner. It was going to be moved to revenue replacement back to general, so I've just put it as general on here for right
Yeah,
now.
we'll have to do an amendment with Ford Sumner and actually get them to agree to the changing it from the 1.56 to just.
Why they have to agree if there wasn't a valid contract.
Can we take that offline and do the? I mean, it's taking up our consultant time.
Right, well, we'll just make sure that we're agreeing
Yeah.
with the sheet that he's got.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I talked with Ben, we would need some kind of agreement where the amount has been reduced because we're changing the amount of our contract with them.
Okay.
So what if they do not agree, Ben?
I don't think it'll be an issue.
I believe the way it was structured, it was, it allowed for the next phases of that project to come back before the commission, before their approval, and I believe it was just that one phase that was approved. So they can't necessarily start work on the additional pieces, and they're required to return the funds by a certain date, so.
The issue was, to start with, it didn't get actually appropriated by the board, so I think that kind of killed it by law as far as the state's concerned, or the county. That's why I'm kind of a little confused about that, but that's something that can be dealt with logistically later.
I think it'll be as simple, just get them to sign off on it. From my conversations with them, I don't think it'll be an issue.
So Ben, what I sent you was like, it was a sheet of where we're at, and it shows, if you go from left to right, it'll show the expenditures from each fiscal year by the, what we're calling general, and the revenue replacement for the 2 full years and the partial year, and then we've got a total expended. And then these are the open POs that are tied to some kind of contract or something we've got out there. And then we also have some budget balances here, and that goes back into the total 37 million on the far right to kind of come up with the total to show us what we have available. But the available this past Monday's higher because these items, which is on this resolution, were removed, at least temporarily or preliminary, to figure out. I think there's a concern right now as far as the buildings and the long-term things, potentially moving some of that to local capital and move some other shorter-term things over into the Arpa to make sure we meet all of our timeframes. I think that was the gist of the discussion.
I'm guessing that's related to, both design and construction, not being able to get, all of it completed in time or fully procured.
All the cash out the door right at the very end, because buildings you start out, but you sometimes run into problems, and that was their big concern, or Ms. Boyd's concern. That was a discussion, I think, the committee, and it was on our agenda, and I think they sent a copy. They wanted to know.
I do feel like 2 years is enough to build a building.
Which that it may be okay, but.
You'll be, typically it's a year is your longest that you'd have for the size of an EMS station anyways. Now, if you have a courthouse project, that's a longer term construction period, but for the size of an EMS station, 2 years should be sufficient to build that.
And if we did drop these back in, I believe it was the 2 EMS stations, there's still, excess uncommitted funds in both categories. So I think they had some question of what's completely allowable in each category. My understanding on the revenue replacement, you can tell me if I'm wrong, basically anything that's allowed by the government, as long as we're following the federal procurement standards, we should be okay on revenue replacement documenting as well.
That's correct. To a certain extent with revenue placement, you drop some of the federal procurement standards. We still include some federal terms and conditions, but as far as it'll follow local and state, which again is not that much different. But as long as it's quote government services, which upon feedback from Treasury is as broad as it sounds, we're any project would be eligible, and that separately is also it's it even allows for even supplanting of funds in worst case scenario. Again, that's usually not as politically interesting, but it can be helpful if there's a slight buffer in case a program it isn't far enough along as you guys would like or something like that at the end of the year to switch it over. So for the most part, we're recommending most clients have a little bit of buffer. With revenue placement, we might have a plan to know where it's going, but that flexibility is very helpful when we don't have with really any other grant out there. So.
And one thing we've done, and I've discussed with David, is for the jail roof improvements project, we are adding the Arpa language, so we could shift that to a revenue replacement project if we needed to at the end of the year.
For the actual construction?
Yeah, for the actual
Okay.
construction.
So we couldn't take the architectural, but
That's
we
gonna
can
be
still
around
grab the
1.7,
construction.
So that you could pick that up if you have a balance come November.
Sorry,
December.
for which piece?
Well, the architectural we've already paid, and it wasn't procured. It was procured locally, but none of the federal. Could we pick up the architectural too, or just potentially the construction portion?
We'd have to review I believe based on reviews that Kim and I have had, we probably wouldn't be able to pick up the architecture. We could look back into it, but certainly the construction portion we could easily do.
Yeah, I know the construction we would be able to, because we're adding the ARPA language that we had, like for highway, for instance, we added that for the jail. So that's one, and that's potentially 1.7 million that you could pick up
For the roof?
for the roof.
Which may eliminate the revenue replacement completely if they put the EMS station back in, or pretty close. There's a question. And also, I think the two they approved Monday, which aren't on here yet, Kim, for the sheriff, they're gonna come out of general, aren't they? Okay.
Yeah, and Ben has signed off on the two items that we reviewed for the sheriff's office, for the vest and for the tasers. Those would come from general.
But we just need to bid one of the two. It's the vest or the taser. The vest. But the tasers, you guys have already looked at the sole source and we're good with it. Okay. And that's about $400 some more thousand out of the general. So, but I think their big question was, what is everything that's allowed to be taken out of the general? And I told them the broad categories, but there's some changes, just like these vests, and there's some other areas in there. And that's something I think that predominantly Ms. Boyd, maybe Mayor Isabel has questions about what's allowable under the general for broadly. What's the most broad things we can pick up in there legitimately?
Okay. So, I think, I guess the question I first ask is whether you would be more interested in things you might already be doing day to day, or the kind of easiest, newer programs that would be eligible. If you want us to focus on one versus the other.
Day to day is what they mentioned
Yes.
at the committee. They want to know, like for instance, right now we already pay this current year about 1.4 million for patrol cars and ambulances, and we potentially will, or probably will next year. Those would probably fall under, I would assume, revenue replacement, but I don't think they could fall back under general, could they, any of them?
No, so in regard to both EMS stations and police, we have to, be making decisions that help either, prevent violence. In the case of police cars, if we're just replacing old police cars, we're really just substituting one for the other. Anything that expands operations, or in the case of the tasers, these are, more effective tasers that are seen as a, a less violent option, right? So, anything that improves the safety of those police officers responding to violent crime, that would be, eligible. We're broadly able to do, if there's, mental health support programs, those can be offered to the general public. Let me see, as far as infrastructure, they've, expanded what is eligible. I know we've already discussed the water programs, and I know those have, I think, have at different times have had different levels of interest, but those are generally eligible. There's kind of different sets of requirements that apply, and kind of they've further expanded that within the past year, but some of those new projects require Davis-Bacon. Additionally, community development block grant type projects and, investments, in responding to homelessness or other, projects, including in certain cases, the non-federal cost share would have to come out of revenue replacement, but other programs, that support those can be eligible as well.
One that's came up, and I think it does qualify under general, and I was asked about it the other day. For instance, if they wanted to buy a car for the VA, because they do outreach, and they're wanting to outreach to the veterans that are potentially tied in because of COVID or other illnesses, would that qualify under general? I think it would.
It likely would, provided it's supporting or expanding the eligible services for veterans.
Yeah, I think
Again,
we'd have to have the data.
if they're doing either homeless outreach or support with healthcare of various kinds, I anticipate if it's expanding the services they offer, it would likely be eligible under standard ARPA. So.
And can I step back into police vehicles and ambulances? I know during the height of COVID, we had trouble, I don't know if I assume there must have been need to shut some down while we disinfect them and stuff. So if we prepare for the future and we might have something else, I don't know if we have enough, if we had any like offline while we're cleaning them, or would that move it into general?
That's part of the one station is actually for COVID storage and for that particular instance, but we didn't have a dedicated ambulance back during COVID. The problem we had during COVID was that the services went way down because people were afraid to ride into the ambulances. They would break their leg and have their loved ones to drive them to the hospital because they didn't
rather than use it.
They were afraid the paramedics and EMTs would contaminate them. So that was the issue that I was passed on from, unless you guys had something different.
So it wasn't a problem with cleaning our ambulance. We didn't need service.
That'd be more of a question for
them.
EMS, but I
Got
just know at the time, they told me the big issue was the revenues were shrinking because people didn't want to ride in the ambulance because they were afraid of COVID itself. They would suffer before they'd even go. But that is a good point. If we had a COVID, and I think it would if we had an ambulance donated for COVID purposes, it would qualify, but I don't know at this point where COVID's at that would be a good use of funds, I wouldn't think. It's not a high enough rate right now, I don't think, to have a full-blown ambulance on COVID.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think that, there's certain things we can do that would help better respond, to a pandemic. I know we were talking about, I think, some, still emergency operations center type, facilities. Again, I think, I know Kim and I have gone back and forth, I think, on some of these EMS stations and whether pieces or parts of them, could be eligible, and under certain requirements. And then, separately with the pandemic itself ending some of those, the official, federal declaration, there's some limitations. That was when we saw with the premium pay expiring, and a few other impacts on day-to-day response expenses. Although, there can still be investments that might help better respond to a future pandemic or an outbreak. So
we could consider it if we wanted to look forward.
Sorry,
no, that's okay. No, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm sorry.
Consider for the vehicles or for what is
To have more. We don't need it. I got it.
Yeah, because I think the response times would be you'd have to have at least one COVID ambulance for every station because your response times would go down if you only had one. So,
Let me ask a real quick question, something you mentioned earlier. Now we can do things to prevent violence and homelessness, and I know originally things that were impacted by COVID-19 we could deal with, but the county every year has a lot of nonprofits that come by for violence prevention and homelessness. We could, as long as we have a subrecipient agreement and monitor those, we could actually allot the money this coming budget year as long as they spend them in 2 years, and they would all qualify, would they not, under the main revenue,
Yeah.
not the replacement, but the other.
similar to what you did
Yep.
for Ashley's.
And that is, we have a full subrecipient monitoring system. Again, one or two of our entities, or the recipients that we support, do their own monitoring, but for the most part, we just do full monitoring. And we're currently doing that in a limited capacity for Sumner. So under that structure, you guys would pick exactly what you want to target, whether that's, violence prevention, mental health, substance use treatment, and other behavioral health services. Those are just eligible being offered to the general public. So those are the easiest, most straightforward to do. And again, for those nonprofits, we can also do everything from, again, homelessness isn't in that general population because we can target any program that helps with the homeless. So it's almost to that same, standard, as well as educational tutoring grants, food assistance to food banks. So it can be easily done as a one broad grant for really, from a few $100,000 to a few million, all general ARPA, that you could pick and choose which of those categories, and even, say, well, we want to focus on this aspect of behavioral health services, or, other programs like that. So
I would, hi everyone, my name is Kennedy Shannon. I would recommend, if you want to do something along those lines, you do it as an open competitive grant process by which all the nonprofits could apply, and you could identify a max grant amount, and then each of the nonprofits would have to identify what type of program they would like to do with that funding. So one could be a program for homeless outreach, one could be a program for food pantry, one could be a program for mental health awareness for students or for the elderly. You can have a very broad array, and then from there you can assign and award grants to those nonprofits who submitted requests for funding and proposals.
Now,
that's usually the way that it's done.
Now, he mentioned elderly. Is that one of the categories? I know you mentioned homelessness and mental health and drugs.
Elderly is not specifically identified, but it is a target demographic that was negatively affected by COVID. We've done quite a few, we just did a low-income senior home repair program for individuals who are in their home who needed repairs that posed health and safety to their health. And because obviously during the next pandemic, our seniors are going to have to, quarantine in place. And if there are issues in their home that can cause harm to them, we want to make sure that those issues are addressed. So things like leaky roofs, HVAC systems that aren't working, so you have no heat or no air conditioning, broken windows, things like that is something you can do as well as an option. So there are quite a few variations of programming that you can offer.
So let me ask you a question. You mentioned earlier we would have to use the revenue replacement if we wanted to match some of the grants, but for instance, we receive opioid abatement money, and if we wanted to use general revenue, so the commission did, toward a match to do some large opioid program, would the general revenues qualify as a match in that particular instance or not?
Yes, you can use revenue replacement to match your opioid funding. So again, we've got
Can we
quite
use
a few
general?
clients who've got opioid funding, and it's not been quite as much. The opioid funding is over like 15 years, so you don't get it all up front. So a lot of communities are dipping into their ARPA to kind of strengthen the programs that they want to initially offer. And then they'll have the funding that they're going to get over the next 15 years kind of maintain that programming that they put in place.
Maybe that's my question wasn't clear. In other words, he mentioned earlier if we were wanting to use for qualified programs for grant matches, we would have to use revenue replacement. Is that always the case, or can you use general revenue in some instances as grant matches for some programs?
who's
When
the
you say-
funding source? Sorry.
No, just say if we found a
general
large,
revenue, you mean his general revenue or ARPA proper? I'm confused.
the ARPA proper, whatever you're calling the general ARPA revenues.
Gotcha,
not
ARPA proper. Yeah, anytime you're doing a grant match, you're going to have to use revenue replacement.
in all cases? Okay.
We didn't have.
Wait,
Is that a
can you do that
settlement, or is that a true like federal grant requiring non-federal cost share? The opioid funds?
The opioid funds are a settlement from I guess, the people that settled in court, so it's not a true settlement it's not a real match that way. But my thought process, there may be some opioid grants out there that they can apply for. And if they didn't have enough opioid funds, they may want to consider
Just depends.
ARPA, but my question was, would the general revenue or the revenue replacement qualify for a match on a federal grant?
You can do some,
I think it might depend on the specific
That's what I
grant,
was
because I
gonna say.
know that, I think there's certain circumstances where we can use that match. I'll have to circle back with Kennedy
Yeah,
on
it
that
depends on
piece,
the grant.
but we can get your response very quickly.
because like for
So-
instance, the health department, we were able to use it under general.
So basically, in some instances, if it's allowed by the feds, we can use general revenues as grant matches for programs that would qualify under general revenues anyway. Or ARPA proper, whichever one you're calling it, I guess ARPA proper. I'm calling it general, the non-revenue replacement.
Your issue is gonna be
Yeah,
your
gotcha.
obligation deadline. If you're gonna do that, you've gotta apply for that grant really quick
Right.
and get
So-
that obligated.
I have another question that we haven't discussed here. I was just thinking about it lately. During the COVID shutdown, we had a lot of people that started using our library systems and stuff more. Ours is not working so well, but we still have people out there that would like to continue to distance and use the libraries more. Is there any way we need to upgrade our system? Is there any way we can get that into general proper?
Potentially, I mean, I think would fall under the, basically government, government continuity services. I don't know if necessarily the library on its own.
I can't think of a proper category
Yeah.
to fit that in.
I think you'd have to
Like in
show
certain-
where you're
in certain
serving
cases, if
disproportionately.
Yeah.
If you did a low-income project for children's in the library, it would qualify with, wouldn't it? If you were for the kids that were low-income or disadvantaged, and you did a program in the library for that would qualify under
Then
COVID proper.
that would be allowable, absolutely.
That's what we
If
could
you
do.
did a program specific for low-income households, you would obviously have to qualify the participants of that program based on their low-income status or whether or not they live in a qualified census tract. If you did something like that, that would definitely be an ARPA proper program that you could run. Even if you added say if you want to build a library, you can build a library in a community where there isn't one, where there's a low-income or qualified census tract. But just general library services and increasing those services, I'd be hard-pressed to find a category under ARPA proper where we could fit that under without having some type of tie to a qualified census tract or low to moderate income.
But you could use revenue replacement because it's an allowed government.
Absolutely,
As long
you
as we
definitely
consider
can use
it properly.
revenue replacement.
Excellent. And not just like a children's catalog, because we definitely have to target low income and a need community.
Yeah.
I got it.
But you
Yeah, I mean,
could,
that's something. Go ahead, Kenny.
if you wanted to up,
Say for instance, you wanted to add computer bays to your library with internet access. And the purpose of that was to give individuals in the neighborhood who are low income access to internet service that they don't have at home.
Oh, nice.
We have a lot of people that apply, that say they do the resumes and stuff on computers
Program that was
at the library. So if we expanded the computers of the library and a large portion is using it for job searches, would that qualify under the revenue, under the proper, potentially? Does my question make sense?
Would that library be located in a qualified census tract?
No.
On a qualified census tract?
No, but there's people all over the county that go in there and use the libraries for job hunting, is what we've been told. They do a lot of their resumes and stuff.
the last time I asked the libraries, they get the technology grant, so their computers are
So it's
replaced,
a moot
so
point.
I don't think that's a need.
Never mind, it's a moot point. We're getting the money from another funding source. I thought we might consider one.
You can do programs that help individuals who are unemployed or underemployed, get jobs or support them, as they get jobs. Generally, we've done this through nonprofits, but there's a few, government run programs as well. So.
Several of the nonprofits were given money to qualify, like the business center, the small business center. We could give the money to them for their same programs to actually operate on.
That would be,
So if you're
So
giving it to an
quickly,
existing program, if we're giving it to an existing nonprofit to support their existing programs, as long as there's something for helping the unemployed or one of these major categories you gave us, that still qualifies as revenue proper, correct? There wouldn't be any questions.
I think you would have to tie it to COVID, and
That's
they're
for the
just-
job centers for jobs though, frankly.
Yeah.
It's this whole
So you
purpose.
could potentially do that. What I recommend is, usually I recommend an open competition only because you run into a situation where if you unilaterally say you give money to one nonprofit and not the other, you may have pushback in the community to say, why did this nonprofit get ARPA funding and the rest of them didn't? So having an opportunity where all of them can ask for ARPA funding, and then you obviously will review their submissions based on the programming. It could either be to fund existing programming that's in place or for new programming. But every nonprofit in the community had an opportunity to get a bite at the apple and submit programming for funding, as opposed to unilaterally kind of picking nonprofits that you want to fund based on the category that you want to fund. Does that make sense?
Well, we already have a panel that does that, that's made up of, I think, commissioners and the citizens, and it's got an actual competitive process right now. So my thought was, several of those qualify for ARPA, so they may want to run that to this committee to look at some of those that's a possibility, that may be something they want to look at. So in other words, they give money to a small business center that does for the unemployed and starting small businesses. They help, I think the food bank still, and several other things are actually charitable. I think the food bank's one still.
I'm not sure about the food bank. We had that problem.
Or did y'all start the food
No,
bank?
no, not us.
Food bank
I'm
still.
sure it's still going, but they had that problem with the.
But that's my thing, if it was a qualified under the general revenues or the ARPA proper, and we were running it through that panel and doing the competitive process, my thought was it would qualify if it met one of those categories, even if it's one we're already doing for their general operations.
And some of that might too depend on whether it was, when the program was allocated, and, ARPA generally doesn't want to fund programs that are already funded through outside sources. And, separately too, again, if it's an internal government program, it's a little easier to qualify. But if you're funding, in certain cases, a nonprofit program that already has, funding, you're just putting more money in their coffers to decide what they want to do with it, as opposed to prioritizing your wants. But again, an already started program, a lot of times is a good basis to provide more funding or expansion or serve more individuals. So, and you can kind of do both at once depending on how you structure. So,
I had a question, and I wanted to ask the mayor about, I know that in the last 12 months at some point we were discussing about HVACs and stuff, and I didn't know if we used our ARPA money for ventilation and if that would be a use for general proper funding. Because there was like 40 units that needed HVAC work and stuff.
We have a capital projects
It could fall,
budget for that.
it could fall under revenue replacement, but if
Revenue
you.
replacement.
if
But
you-
not general proper for ventilation?
for the most part, unless it's structured very specifically for COVID mitigation, so if we were replacing all of the filters in buildings with specific increased filtration, we could, we've done programs like that under the mitigation category, but only when it met specific standards. So if it, needs maintenance or, needs to be replaced, it might not necessarily meet that mitigation standard. So it would kind of be looking at each project, or each different piece and seeing whether it'd be eligible. Any thoughts on that piece, Kennedy?
I have one question. What about UVC lights in that HVAC?
Yeah, that would be, I think that's a good example of, you could tie that directly to, mitigation in certain cases.
Okay.
Other, sometimes I've seen purchases of, air filters in kind of like the hallways going into buildings that generally don't have, part of the air, circulation, other things like that, that we can point to studies saying that this decreases, COVID exposures or other diseases.
I'm sorry, I was talking and on mute. Absolutely. So say, for instance, you had a system and it's an older system and you want to update and replace it to a newer system that has a built-in HEPA filter that filters out 99.9% of germs, including the COVID-19, COVID germs and things like that. That would be something that would be tailored to that. But if it's just general maintenance on HVAC system, then that would fall up under your revenue recovery.
So what kind of research would we need to do to determine whether we're trying to upgrade or just maintain? It would be a matter of looking at what we're doing to it, if I'm
So, I
understanding.
mean, that's the question. Are you trying to upgrade and get a new system, or are you just trying to maintain the systems that you currently have?
Is it trying to bait COVID some way?
Yeah, we have a lot of buildings. Some of them do need just general maintenance, and I understand that's not what we want to do with the ARPA money. But some of them, we might not even realize at this point that they do need updating. They're old, and I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say they have something in their ventilation system, or it could be healthier. And we just haven't taken a look at any of that.
Gotcha. But if you take a look at it through that lens and you're able to provide, some documentation to substantiate that, I think you can make that fit. But that's what Ben means by a very tailored approach, and that you've got to be able to make a straight line argument to this system will prevent the spread of COVID.
And separately, when we go beyond those bigger AC systems, any, capital expenditures, require an additional test showing, why they're justified under ARPA, and then separately, we, in certain cases, have to do a cost comparison showing, how this helps prevent COVID more than the alternatives, and they require us to look at maybe 3 other buildings and why we think this one would be the best one. Again, we could do multiple projects at once and, under that assessment, but that, capital expenditure test would apply in for these larger capital expenditures.
Okay, so if we were to say, replace the HVAC unit in a building, and we're adding on the UVC light, and say maybe an electrostatic filter or something like that, would that all be covered under ARPA if we were replacing the HVAC unit?
It's gonna depend on
Doing
the
it all as
situation,
one
right?
project?
Doing it all in
Yeah,
one
depending on the
project?
situation. Yep, I think if you're doing it all as one big project, I think yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And would that also include, I think recently, and I don't know if we're in the middle of this project or if we've just finished it or if we're planning it, we put in new filtration and stuff for our animal control center because they felt like, and I mean, that it was disease driven. I don't know that they were saying the animals had COVID, but it was definitely infectious disease in the animal population. And they're trying to address their filtration system and their airflow.
You said this project was already completed, though?
I don't know. Can you address that? Do y'all know?
I don't know.
Which one was it?
It was the animal control center. Part of our animal control discussions have been the air filtration in there, and we shut down our animal control due to disease for a month. I mean, we actually have had disease in our animal population and shut down. And one of the things that they addressed was the airflow, and they said that we would ideally, if we went with best practices, we'd want more units in there, but we couldn't do that, so kind of like a Band-Aid. We added some things, or we're planning on adding some things. So I guess I'm just shifting from human COVID to our animal control population, and and with that, I guess we have employees and inmates in there that are breathing the whatever was in the air that they thought shut us down.
I think we might need a little more information on that. I think that one might be a little harder to meet that capital expenditure test, looking at comparable options, because, they're going to want us to pick the project that's going to have the most, COVID mitigation.
Right, yeah,
And then separately, we have the procurement side, if any piece was already procured.
yeah,
So that one might be a little harder than kind of
Yeah.
a building more generally used by the public or with some sort of public health impact.
yeah,
Particularly, at health center of, we could probably more easily meet that requirement, or, maybe a building that offers, support to individuals who are, individuals of the public that need other assistance, right?
I understand.
Like,
it's fine. I don't want to try and fit it in the hole. It's just exactly what we're talking about, but it was with the animals and not with people, so I thought I'd ask.
Hey, Ben, just to kind of get things moving, just to clear up, revenue replacement can be used basically for anything that's a government service as long as we follow a limited amount of federal procurement requirements, not all of them, but the ones that are required.
Yep.
And just to kind of clarify for the rest of, for everybody, can we just kind of go through quickly, and I know what they are, but broadly, what the requirements are for stuff that we're gonna run under ARPA proper? That way, instead of the one of us, maybe we can get kind of more of the broad categories.
Sorry, thank you.
I know you went through several of them, but you know there's COVID mitigation and low income, but can you kind of go through some of the broad categories of things that they should really be looking at to see if they can put it under proper?
Oh, okay, so I can go through kind of the need-based approach, and that kind of also ties, if you hear this, we won't dive into it in depth, that uses not enumerated basically is kind of the structure that Treasury provides us to, if the project doesn't specifically fit, to create our own. So Kennedy mentioned it when we were talking senior populations. Treasury somehow doesn't mention that specifically as ARPA, but that is one of the simplest ones we've been able to tie into having been impacted by ARPA. So basically, Treasury allows us to assess a need coming out of the pandemic, and so they've given us specific uses. Businesses that have been financially impacted, nonprofits that have been financially impacted. Members of the public, that are either dealing with direct or indirect impacts of the pandemic, like housing issues or issues related to food or other needs there. And so basically identifying a specific business, nonprofit, or class of households, businesses or nonprofits that are impacted. And then they have a further level that's disproportionately impacted, and that's really going to be that low income as well as the qualified census tracts. And those are, we can go above and beyond, in certain cases under that, the impacted population, we can assist up to the dollars they lost. A business lost $4,500 due to the pandemic, we can assist them with $4,500. For that disproportionately impacted, we can say, hey, we're going to go above and beyond that and not just pay for your housing, but provide additional support. And then we design a response to meet that need. So it can be a program, a service, or capital expenditure to help respond to that COVID need. It must be related and reasonably proportional to the harm. So that's why some of those HVAC programs, we'd have to, they make us do that capital expenditure test. They're going to probably favor, $300,000, $500,000 HVAC programs that are going to be in, a VA hospital and, programs that are assisting more generally facing places than they might in a warehouse, HVAC program for $10 million, right? So that's where kind of that reasonably proportional to the harm piece is. And then must be designed to benefit that impacted class or individual that I mentioned. So those are kind of the very, very broad aspects, and generally if we find a program that meets those, we can figure out a category that it can fit in, as long as it's not too far away. And then if you want, I can dive into some of the more specific examples they give. We already mentioned a few of those, but did that cover what you're looking for, David?
Yeah, that's kind of the more, they already know most of them. It's like COVID treatment or broadband, water line, drainage. But there are these ones here, the non-enumerated, where I think everything's getting a little fuzzy. But for just in the broad sense, it some way has to be for the non-enumerated involving COVID treatment or abatement or COVID damages of some sort.
Low income, yeah.
Or low
Yes, or again with those impacted
disproportionate because of low
populations,
Or assistance to impacted populations, low income, qualified census tracts. You can assist them too. So it's either a direct tie to COVID, or you're assisting low to moderate income individuals that are in a qualified census tract.
So I have a question. I was at a local city meeting, perhaps in the last 12 months, and a veterans group came forward. I don't quite understand, here in the city, the veterans are in a facility somewhere, and they were asking the city to help them with drainage issues and different issues with their complex. Is a veterans group included in some group that we could help, especially if they're low income, to get into that? Or this is a property, I don't know if...
Is it a nonprofit owned property, a private owned property? What?
This was the one, and maybe somebody at the table can help me. It was one in Gallatin. It's near that. Mayor, do you know?
Is it the Foreign Legion? Or
It was over there. I can find out more. I just don't know if I need to find, if it's something, they were asking the city to help and the city had no funds.
So, but you're saying it has to be COVID-related somewhere or somewhere on the qualified census tract for low income and disproportionately affected, so we would have
Right,
to
and it
prove
would
that.
mainly have to be owned by like a nonprofit. If it's a private-owned facility, you really can't use ARPA dollars to enrich a private-owned landowner for the purposes of increasing their water flow. Now, if this is a county-owned building, city-owned building, or something like that's different, or even if it was a nonprofit and if a nonprofit applied for, say, assistance from you all to help with their water system, obviously water and COVID are directly tied, right? So being able to have effective waste treatment and wastewater systems
That's what they had trouble
is a really
with.
big deal, but you'd have to see who owns that facility. And if it's a VA-owned facility, then it probably would not be a go, because the VA has its own funding, obviously, so.
So, but drainage, if it was a nonprofit that qualified because it's a drainage issue, it could be taken from proper, other proper.
Potentially. If they come to you and say, hey, we're a nonprofit, we
We could
own this
follow up on
building,
that.
we would
They
like
were-
a grant
Yeah, you can
because
follow-
we're
you can
having
follow
drainage
up.
issues with our wastewater, and we can do a direct tie, obviously, to
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 and wastewater. That might be an opportunity where you might be able to provide funding for them for that purpose, but you would have to see the structure of who owns that building and what the issues are as it relates to that building.
And you'd have to have the subrecipient monitoring, so procurement. So there'd be a lot
You
that
mentioned
goes into
you
Right,
that.
said
brings us
subrecipient
to-
monitoring.
Bring us back to another question. You know, we're getting the subrecipient monitoring agreements, and we're doing the subrecipient monitoring. After the payouts, how long do we have to monitor those individuals on this
Through
particular?
the period of performance.
So
of
the
your
money is
2020.
gone, yeah, until 2026. So the money's gone and until you get all the programmatic information you need. So
So we don't have to
there are gonna be
monitor
some
after that.
situations where you give a subrecipient money and they're gonna spend it quickly and they're gonna give you the data you need to say, hey, this is what we did with the money. There are gonna be some programs that are gonna be ongoing and you're gonna have to monitor them for the entirety until the end of the grant in 2026, until it closes out. So subrecipient monitoring is a really big lift.
So after close,
As it
there's
relates to
none.
ARPA.
So that was my question. After close for subrecipient monitoring, they got the water lines in or the broadband. The county no longer has any obligation for any type of subrecipient monitoring. Once they've built the broadband lines or the water lines, we're pretty much out of it. Correct?
Yeah, unless you've got any updated data requirements, how many individuals were serviced, how many individuals continue to be serviced after a year. If there are any type of data points that you want to report back to Treasury, you're gonna have to continue that subrecipient monitoring to get that information. But if it's a capital project where you're building something or you're installing something, for the most part, once that's done, then you're done.
Do we have any
So-
that have data points that we have to report, Kim? I don't think so.
I have a question about the resources needed for the monitoring. Obviously,
Yes.
Ms. Norfleet works hard and a lot on these things. Is her salary part of the monitoring that we could put towards general proper?
We actually get these guys to do a lot of the monitoring
Yes.
with the intent.
We have the capacity to run, and we are currently doing subrecipient monitoring and can do that for any
They do all
additional
of it, so I thought Kim
subrecipients.
was,
We've contracted.
I'm very much
Some of
Kim,
Kim
is
does some.
supporting in broad administration, and those pieces are eligible under the administration category as well. So that is actually a piece
Just track it real
Treasury
hard.
is requiring us to report out, and we'll be meeting further with
Put part of it in.
Sumner County on that. They haven't yet told us
Track.
what they want us to report out to them, despite the fact that it's due 2 months from today. So we'll definitely be meeting with Kim and David to make sure we're properly reporting those pieces. But yes, both are fully eligible to be covered through 2026 under
Through 2026.
standard ARPA. Admin's a little different than the other categories,
My-
but it's fully eligible.
My only concern is those are kind of time-consuming and expensive to track and risky of proving it if the feds are auditing it. So really, I've kind of leaned against taking
I
existing
think we
county
can
staff as the
definitely
man. We kind of,
cover what iParametrics is doing.
yeah, we definitely put we got you guys under the general.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, to do that part and take that burden off of any individual staff, because it is a lot, and especially, if you're selected for audit, we would be able to assist with that process too, so, it would be quite a lift for 1 or 2 staff members to have to do that.
The original intent when we contracted with parametrics was for them to do the primary subrecipient monitoring. That was part of their purpose. So was to keep it off the county staff. Plus, parametric has different resources that they had on their billing schedule if they needed it, such as an engineer.
And they have the website that they have created where people submit the information, so.
Right, and that's why we retain them. They do this quite often, and we thought it was more proficient than hiring them.
Yeah.
The way to do it and
Yeah.
try to track it. But you are correct, it is qualified, but I think it would be expensive to track though, and hard.
Okay.
And that is, and Dave, what you're doing, that structure is common with most, again, you can claim additional admin expenses. I think nearly all of our clients are leaving some admin money on the table just because that tracking is a little more complicated. So that's, a few are grabbing some of that money, but for the most part, they're doing a similar structure that you are, so.
Anybody else?
So really quickly, how much is left for you all to obligate?
Well, that's kind of a float right now. We're showing $9 million, but there was several $1 million that was unobligated the other day, and then there was $400-some thousand obligated the other day. So we're really looking somewhere upward of probably 7 or less. It's not obligated.
That's a decent amount of money to have to obligate in 10 months?
Right. That's our concern right now. The revenue replacement shouldn't be an issue because we can put patrol cars and ambulances in there, or
right. It's just your
basically
Arpa
anything.
proper stuff that you're going to have the hardest time trying to fill. My recommendation for that, if you get to a point where you're like, what do we do? We're having issues trying to find programs that fit. You should do some forward-facing programs. And by forward-facing programs, those are the programs where you do the nonprofit assistance grant program, right? And each nonprofit can get up to $100,000 or $50,000. You do a potentially low-income senior home repair program where a senior can apply to get, a grant up to $15,000 for, vital home repairs. You might even do a rental assistance program. I don't know what the rental market is in your community or if there's an issue with that, but those are programs that easily fit within an Arpa proper framework that also are really good because they're forward-facing programs and that individuals get individual grants of Arpa funding. And secondly, they are easily obligated, and they, like I said, they fit within that particular Arpa proper framework, especially if you have a focus on low to moderate income or those that are in qualified census tracts. So if you all ultimately decide to make that decision, we definitely can assist you with that. That's already within the scope of our contract we have with you. And we've been doing that for all of our other clients because they're in the same boat you all are in. They've got quite a bit of money they still have to obligate, and they're having issues. The revenue recovery is the easy part. It's just the Arpa proper stuff is the difficult part. And clearly nobody wants to get to that deadline and have funds that are unobligated because we don't know what that ultimately will result, especially with the political climate we're in now. We don't know what that will mean. So that might be an option for you all if you can't find any other programming that you can fit within that category. Create some forward-facing programs for your nonprofit population, your senior population, your homeless population. Those that are homeless, you could do a program where they can apply and get a first month security deposit and 6 months of future rent to get them stable and hopefully get them a job to maintain that housing. You can do a plethora of different programs like that.
So let me ask you if this fits in. I was just at a city meeting the night before last, and they had builders trying to do some complicated building arrangements, but basically they were trying to just create 25 apartments to give subsidized rent to our GAP employees. But they said also maybe this would come in handy to our students at our community college, which we're seeing people actually wanting to live closer to our community college. And they were saying they had a great need. Is that what we're talking about? No.
I'm thinking more
Like
what we're looking at
subsidized.
is we could, basically what they're saying is part of the contract. We basically get IT to set up on a website, do something similar to the giving committee. You tell how much ARPA funds you have available, what the requirements are, and you do a competitive thing on it. Right now, you still got.
And I would recommend running it through a nonprofit, because if the county has to start taking 100 applications and verifying income, that could get tedious.
Right, that's kind of what we're running to. That's what I was saying. If we're giving $15,000 to each senior, and there's certain requirements. We need a nonprofit to do that, or a contract with a third party to completely run that. And basically a third party vendor, or even our paramedics to completely run it.
Because we've done home repair
Yeah, so
programs in the past.
if you did take that route, we could run the program for you. So what that means is
Solely.
there would be an online
They would be our
application.
third party.
We'd have case managers assigned, individuals would apply, they would have to upload proof of income to show their low income,
Or with their
or that they
community.
live in a qualified census tract. We also, say for instance, if there was a nonprofit assistance grant, the nonprofit would have to submit a narrative about what programs they want to fund, how many individuals they're going to serve. Are they going to service individuals who are low income? Are they going to service individuals who are qualified census tracts? And then we would have a criteria where they would get awarded points based on what you all want to fund. So if you have a priority for funding youth programs, or a priority for funding nonprofits that deal with the seniors, whatever you set your priorities are, we will set the program to meet that. And then based on that, we will do the screening and then let you know which organizations were ultimately selected for funding. And then you all just cut the check. And then we would subrecipient monitor to make sure that those organizations are doing what they said they would do. So if they said they would service 100 seniors over the next 2 years, we would monitor them over that period and get that data back from them to make sure that they are in fact doing what they said they would do in exchange for that grant, as well as reviewing any reimbursement requests, because most of those grants would be given on a reimbursement basis. So every month the organizations would have to submit for reimbursement, and we would check to make sure that those reimbursement requests meet what they have in their contract and meet federal requirements before we then pay them for that reimbursement.
But we would need to start that pretty quickly if they were gonna look at something that way, because you gotta set up the site, receive it, and have all the funds committed by December, 2024 to these individuals, and then pay over the next 2 years.
Yeah, so we would, if you wanted to move something like that, we would need like a 60-day lead time to get a system built out and a program built out. But after you obligate that money, we can get that system up and running within 60 days. Most of those programs don't run that long, because believe it or not, that money goes quick. So we usually keep the program applications open for a period of either 30 to 60 days, and the community applies, and then from there we go in. You can also have preference. So if you want to make preference for those individuals who are low income, meaning they get processed first, there will be a question on the application, are you low income? They would have to provide proof of that, and we would process their applications first before everybody else. And it's just processed on a first come, first served basis until the funding is exhausted. With you all identifying how much you want to put in that pot. So if you put $1 million in there and you say, each nonprofit can get up to $50,000, then there you go. You can assist 20 nonprofits with a $50,000 grant for a various number of different projects that they want to do. The parameters are up to you.
Can, if we were interested in like giving rental assistance to disabled veterans, is that a
Absolutely.
Population we could hit?
So you would do an application process very similar to that. So we've done a few rental assistance programs. So if you wanted to just do the veteran population, obviously they would have to apply. They would have to provide proof of their veteran status. Would this program be for homeless veterans or veterans at risk of homelessness, or both? Because so if they're homeless, we could pay security deposit and maybe 6 months of rent going forward. That means you've given them housing stability for 6 months, and during that 6 months, we'll get them, referred to either the VA to look at veteran benefits if they not already received veteran benefits, or you can get them connected to a job placement or job readiness, so that during that 6 months that we're paying their rent, they could be getting to a place where they can get a job and maintain that housing. The other alternative are those veterans who are at risk of homelessness, meaning they're in a place now, but they have a writ for eviction and they owe back rent. You can pay the back rent that they owe and maybe take them forward another 3 months to give them stability so that they are back on a good foot and can maintain that housing. So we've done both programs. Some programs do both of those, some programs do either or of those options.
David, I wanted to add one thing in response to what you're saying as far as that obligation deadline. It is the end of 2024, and there's one aspect that truly doesn't make sense, but I specifically, Kenny and I asked about it when they had one of these questions, and it was, well, you're telling us the obligation to a contractor or subrecipient is the only obligation that matters. So if I'm running one of these programs and I'm the city or a county, I can't run it myself beyond 2024, but you can contract or sub-award a program to somebody else to run these funds, again, you wouldn't be the ones cutting the check, it would be that contractor or that
Or
subrecipient.
them.
Our
Could
contractor,
go
yeah.
beyond
Would be
2024
nonprofit.
under
Or
that
contractor.
structure.
I
So
like the
Set up.
as long as
contract.
we're planning ahead,
Either one.
we could do that sort of thing and not be as pressed for time in some of these pieces.
I
Again,
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Basically, if we were running it ourselves, we're not truly obligated for those disbursements. If we have a vendor where we say we'll give you $1 million to run this, and they've obligated, they can continue paying for 2 years out, as long as they've
It defies
obligated.
logic,
Yeah,
but
because
Treasury allows it.
Well, that's
Yeah,
kind of
so
what I
we
was
told our
thinking,
veterans,
but
here,
I
our
understood,
veterans,
okay.
here's $1 million, we wanna run a program, give this $1 million away, and this is how you give it away, then it's considered obligated.
Right, that's
But
what I
if
was
you all
thinking.
did that internally, it's not considered obligated.
I got you, which makes, sense, but not
It
for
makes
anybody
no
else.
sense, but I think the thinking
I
behind
understand
that
their
is,
thought.
okay, you can say.
I understand their
"We're running the
reasoning.
Program, it's in our general fund, and then you can say, well, we were gonna give $1 million away, now we're not, and now we're gonna put this money back in our general fund. I guess they just wanna make sure that it's not still within the hands of the county or the city, and that it is in fact truly obligated to someone else or another entity, and is considered thus spent.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense, but I kind of get why they do it that way.
I like the flexibility. It's really a nice option. It's really good.
And that would especially be the case if you look to do a few programs. We'd probably do one after another, likely keeping the same case managers in place. They become more familiar with the area and can refer people to other services. If they're working with any folks on your team, there's, some familiarity, and, we'd run those programs back to back, and less of a press for time. Separately, you could start with a program that targets just veterans, and then you put in $1 million, and, you basically structure in a way that say, we're gonna prioritize veterans first, and you open it
And
up.
then
to-
anybody else, yep. So
And
anybody else
after-
can get assistance.
Yeah, and as long as it's in that same expenditure category under ARPA, which we could definitely structure it that way, it's not gonna be considered a re-obligation, because that was your plan the whole time, so.
So we've done it very similar. We just did Newton County, Georgia. We did, their allocation was 21 million. They put 10 million. They put half of it in direct programming. So we ran a rental assistance program for them, 2 million for that. We did a nonprofit assistance direct program for them. They put $1.5 million in that. We did a program for food pantries. So churches and things that had food pantries, they did $1 million in that program. They did a $5 million senior home repair program. So we ran
Wow.
all of their programs, and their ARPA money's
That would
gone.
be awesome.
They got it spended, and they were able to do quite a bit in the community and help quite a few low income and qualified census tract individuals in the community. So
just to be clear, because we've only got a few minutes left, because I think you guys had to 11:30. If the county commission wants to do a project like this, it just really takes about 60 days to ramp it up, 30 to 60 days to collect the data, and then to get it tied out. So they really need to try to do something, say, by July 1 if they're going to run a program like that.
absolutely, because once you've obligated to us and say, hey, you're going to run these programs, it's solidified, it's obligated. Then the next ticking time clock for us is that we just got to make sure those programs are run and completed by December 31st, 2026.
And with that kind of in mind, I just wanted to mention before we're done, and I believe the meeting that I had following this was canceled, but we created, and I believe you guys got the first iteration of this, but we have a plan as well as a tracker specific to obligations that kind of fits all of our client into that. Again, this meeting really kind of fits in trying to get all these funds obligated. But we have a tracker that's literally, we built out for all of our clients, and we copy and paste the information directly in the portal, and we'll update it based on planning. But basically, we're assessing all of these projects to see how much money might need to be returned, so we have a plan in place to re-obligate those funds. Under this structure, really, the plan would be to work with departments and kind of get a final assessment this summer of where all obligations sit. And then, present that, to leadership for final, decision making. Again, we wouldn't want to wait that long on any funds we know are currently not obligated. We can go ahead and put a plan together right now. But basically, for the final 3 months of this program, our plan would be really, and again, we could have, financial assistance or, any sort of assistance program running concurrently, but we're really just focused on, switching okay, this nonprofit, didn't spend the money that they thought they would or behind schedule. Let's switch that over to, predetermined replacement projects for that. So again, I believe there's an early version that was sent to Sumner on this. We can get the updated version in place. Again, when I mentioned we're bringing on Tony involved, it's helping support me and making sure we have all these pieces tracked. Regarding, obligations. But again, you guys are thinking the right time frame. Really, we have to have a lot of this figured out by this summer, so we know we can get these programs up and running. The last thing we want to do is return funds that could be used in Sumner to the federal government. So.
Anybody else have any questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you guys
Hey,
for,
I just wanted to tell you, I emailed you the subrecipient agreement for the 9 million, so, for the water line.
Thanks.
All
Saw
right.
that, Kim. I have a half drafted email, so I'll respond to you later.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
hey Ben, can you go ahead and email me that final one and I'll go ahead and see if the chairman can put it on budget this month.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, take care, and if you have any other questions, please feel free to let us know, and we're here to help you get your money obligated. So,
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
guys. Bye.
all right, take care. Bye-bye.
Can you shut that thing? I'll reach it. Where was the X?
It's red.
Oh, it's the
I'm
thing.
gonna end the call.
There you go. Okay. I did not put election of chairman on here. Do you want me just to run down the agenda or does somebody else want to do it? Is that fine?
I have no problem running down with you.
Oh, well, first it's just say call to order since we actually had the meeting out of order. And then item A is invocation, and let's ask Bob if he wants to do the invocation.
Lord, we are grateful each day that we have our health and we have the ability to worship you, have a service that is conducted within this county to help the benefit of these people that we represent. Always keep in mind that we are looking for the general welfare of what is going on in this county. We covet your knowledge, your wisdom from above so that we can make these decisions without any personal bias or personal gain. Be with us as we conduct these affairs. We ask this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Item B is approval of the agenda.
I so move.
Second.
All ayes.
Aye.
Ayes have it. New business, discussion with the Arpa consultants to stay on the time frame. We did that actually before the meeting was called, but we'll consider it part of the meeting. Item B is the question number one from the budget committee. B1 was what has been spent. Included for everybody is actually a summary. The only thing that's not on there right now is the two items from the sheriff's department from Monday. Waiting for the final signature of the resolution. And then I've also included the resolution from Monday of the items that were temporary or permanently or just pulled at this point. Which item, this sheet actually covers item 1, 2, and then I think the discussion covered items 3 and what items the county currently purchasing that can be planned from ARPA. So I think we've covered all the items that the budget committee asked us to do other than to bring back the items that can be purchased or what the intended thought process is.
And I would hope that we can reach out to everyone on budget and have them watch the consultants and listen to what they provided.
But I think the gist of it was right now is your revenue replacement, as long as we're following the limited amount of required federal additional stuff for procurement, but it's anything that you can spend. So you really just need to kind of determine what you want to spend on. And Kim pointed out a good thing, if we can bid the roof with the ARPA procurements, we could actually use the roof to take out a large portion of this and leave that money in your capital
That way
fund.
you have that, and you can always wait till later this fall if projects aren't getting to where they need to be, then that, you could pick up that 1.7 potentially. We'll know the bid hopefully by April, so.
And then another thought process, let them, budget and commission determine, if they determine what they want to spend out of this, it's allowable. Then July 1, they may want to consider having our parametric, if they haven't spent all the funds, determine what programs they want to do and run it
And run it
forward facing,
through them,
going through,
yeah.
if it's whatever they want to run that's allowable.
And I would like to understand more about the broadband. I was telling Mr. Lawing, I had been approached by one of the cities, and I don't understand enough about broadband to address what they had said to me. They were claiming that we could use it in a better way. They said that they felt like that we were using it to supplement, I don't know, the internet providers more so than helping our rural, needy citizens. And I can't even address it because I don't understand anything about the broadband or who's managing it or how it works.
So we have a $5 million allocation, it's a subrecipient agreement with CEMC, and that's already been obligated.
And I'm good with it being
almost
obligated.
spent.
I just need to be able to
I think
address.
here's the confusion.
Yeah, I don't understand.
With broadband, you're supposed to be covering unserviced or end of the mile, but you can put in the interim sections to get to the end of the mile. And this is part of a larger program. So the county gave $5 million to CMC as a much larger project. The main drive of it was to go ahead and get it out into the far rural areas. So CMC may be doing some of the middle areas, but the end goal of why we gave them the $5 million was to get these rural unserviced areas. So the whole 25 million, because I think we put 20, is that correct, Kim?
It's just $5 million.
We put 5, but they put like 20, they put a
Yeah,
lot.
they put a lot.
Who's
So the whole
they?
project, CMC, the whole project would not be covering unserviced people, but the whole goal is to
thank
cover
you.
unserviced people. If that makes sense, the goal is to cover your unserviced people, but every dollar wouldn't necessarily go to unserviced people because you've got to get
We
it
got to
there.
get to them.
So you may have to go places, say for instance Comcast and AT&T somewhere already, and you're trying to service somebody over here they won't service, you may have to go through one of their service areas to get through it, and you may be resurfacing an area.
So that
But
might be
my
what
understanding, that's allowable.
that might be what this person is seeing.
That's probably what they're
something that
saying, because you've got to get the lines over there to service the unserviced areas, so they're crossing.
I just
existing
needed to
service
be
areas.
able to address it because I was unsure of
Well,
what
see,
was.
That's my
was-
understanding
That was
of it.
one of the things, I don't know if, is CMC running the broadband?
That's my understanding, but Kim's the one's been
Okay,
working
see,
with them.
that, they came and I asked, what was that box they put on that, on the pole outside my, on my property? And that was what it was for, cause I have.
Do you already have
company
internet?
Electric. Oh, yeah, I've already got broadband.
But they gotta go
And that's
buy
what I
you-
didn't understand, why they were sticking
But
this.
who do you have it with though? Just to.
Mine's with Earthlink, which is really AT&T.
But is Earthlink or is AT&T gonna service those rural people that's past you?
Yeah, that's what.
So they would have to
Well, no,
go
I
by
mean,
you to get to them.
I'm about 3/4 of a mile out of Hendersonville.
So that's my understanding, unless Kim understands something different. It's got to be the goal
It
to
should be
service
up
the
in Portland
unserviced.
and,
Right.
Yeah, they
and
have-
Westmoreland and Bethpage, that's where it should be.
They have different service substations, and I think we're participating with 3 of their substations that they're participating in. And like he said, it's a part of a bigger.
So what
broadband
is the last mile? Do we have people that, I mean, are
There's
they
people that
using
don't have
dial-up?
any. There's
Do we
people
have
that don't
people
have
that do,
broadband.
well, they have dial-up then, right? Or-
They don't have high-speed broadband, it's got
Okay.
an
They have direct TV type, because that was what,
So,
that's what Elise
how-
had up there in Portland, because they were having to run it through the dish that they had with
Yeah,
direct TV.
what's our population that doesn't, that
Kim
our need?
and
What's our-
CMC was involved in it more, but
don't
there's
know.
certain requirements for the broadband that's put in, and it's in the, and I forget what it is right now off the top of my head, Kim may know, but I can't. I've seen it before, it's in the federal. I
So
can't tell you right
we
off.
gave them the money, we're partnering with
We're
them,
partnering with them, we met.
and they got every bit of the responsibility and all the project, and I would just like to
And
know,
they've almost already, if they haven't already, the last time Ben and I had spoken, they were close to spinning out their funds.
that's good, I just wanna make sure they have enough to
But-
get, if we have more, whatever population that's not being reached,
What they
are we
agree,
servicing them?
I believe, based off our conversation, what we helped with CMC, that helped them accelerate their timeline of getting service to individuals quicker.
and what the agreement does is guarantee that they are following the federal regs of what's required, and that they will let us monitor.
And
So
they are-
they're basically agreeing they are doing the last mile and stuff.
We've
as
had a
required.
subrecipient meeting with Parametrics and myself and CMC, and they've met all the spreadsheet requirements that you have to for the service addresses, because there's a whole list of information that you have to do for the treasury reporting.
So, can you ask them, like, how many users we have that are still in need? Or are they gonna, with the money they have and our money, are they going to make it all the way to the last mile that Mr. Long talks about? Is that what you
When I'm
call
saying
it?
last mile, that means unserviced people. In other words,
Unserviced people, exactly, I'm right
Not
there.
every single person.
Are we
that
gonna
they're
make it
servicing
there with their
unserviced
money
people.
and our money? Are we gonna get there?
Okay.
And how many people is it we're talking about? And if we don't make it to every one of them, how many are left?
I'm not so sure that they ever
And maybe they're
promised
all
to-
there already.
To service every single person in the county. They're promising to service out, to move the service out.
Oh, okay, that's, see, I
Into the
didn't even
rural area, so
understand.
they, in other words, they're saying they're moving this, basically the requirement is you're servicing unserviced people that didn't get it before. Not saying you're gonna service every single
And there is
How
a
many
part
more
of
do-
the county that they're not allowed to service because of the telephone cooperatives. There's a part of the county that they are only allowed to service.
But they're
Oh.
servicing unserviced areas,
Yeah.
my point, not every
Yeah,
area.
not every, yeah, so
The
how
goal is to
many?
get to the unserviced areas.
Does Cumberland Electric take care of all of Sumner County?
No, that's what I was just
That's
saying,
what-
that
okay.
there's this part of the county that they're not allowed to because of the telephone cooperatives, there's regulations involved.
So like my subdivision might be an example. There's already 2 in there, but if they get to somebody unserviced, they may have to cross it again.
In
There's already
the,
2 providers in there.
in the end, will we be able to say that their money, our money, and all the other people's money, how many more people we got to reach? Will we be able to say that at
We
the end
should
of
be
this?
able to track how many people they've served through the funding that we've provided to them.
And how many are left that we could have, if we, I mean, maybe they're all reached now, or how many are still gonna be left in need?
Plus, I
that
think
we
there's
could
only
get
so
to.
fast they can move anyway because they have, their internal infrastructure.
I just wanna be able to answer these questions. Like I said, it came to me and I was told straight up, we were not doing what we needed to be doing, and I said, honestly, I have no idea.
I was in
And I
discussions with
wanted
them a couple
to
of
find
years
out.
ago.
Huh?
I was in the discussions with Kim and CMC and Mr. Hope. It's been a couple of years back, and I've looked at the treasury requirements, but both of those have been a while. I know there's a minimum requirement for the broadband, and the goal has to be to service unserviced, and we do have their subrecipient agreements, and as Kim said, they're sending all the stuff showing that they are servicing those individuals. So as far as we can tell, CMC's doing exactly as agreed.
Yeah, so we can just say it's better, but some kind of quantification.
They're
Yeah.
servicing them. That's
Yeah.
their goal.
I
They're moving that way.
should be able to get you the details on what areas were serviced and how many people and.
That's all. Thank
don't-
you.
I don't
And it was
know.
only because I was like,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I don't know if I can pull what's left in need, but I can reach out to the state broadband office. I know they do a mapping across the whole state of Tennessee, and they may have specific to Sumner County that we could pull.
Yeah. And I don't want to add to your workload. I know you got a lot. I'm just wondering.
I'm happy to help. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just,
But these telephone cooperatives, they do offer the broadband in those other areas?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we don't have to worry about that.
So is
Yeah,
the
I think
subcommittee.
it's in CTC, it's up in the upper part of the county.
Okay.
So as the subcommittee, what would you like to report back to budget? There's 4 of us here. I think right now this sheet with putting the sheriff's back on and probably this resolution would be the minimum. And then there's the film telling all the things allowed, and we may want to also report back,
I guess that
talking to
was,
Miss Norfleet, that right now when we're procuring the roof, that may be one of the large considerations to come out of the revenue replacement. It'll finish a lot of it off.
so with the ARPA money, I sit on the archives committee. This is a new discussion. I don't think we've had this one. And it came up I have a neighbor that works, she has a company, I don't know, and then she was explaining to me that basically they do she deals with our archives building, and she has runners that come from Nashville. They pay them $100, and they come to our archives building because we're not digitized. I'm bringing this up at the table to see if y'all know this. And she says that they pay $100 for a runner to go, so if I get a divorce and I file a job something and they've got to come and get legal documents. But she says that like Davidson County, they pay Davidson County $25 for every digital report they look at. She tells me that Sumner County is losing revenue because we don't digitize our archives. Does anybody have any input
I
on
just know
that?
there's not a lot of revenue from archives or foot traffic I can see, but I don't know any of the rest of that. But
Yeah, I don't know.
the same question being is if digitizing stuff can take quite a while, so it would be something the county's allowed to buy. So if we followed the federal procurement, you could use revenue replacement for that. That would be a
At
possible.
what point, I guess, and this would go, I think
Contract it
through the mayor's office with the archives and stuff, Are we going to look at modernizing archives, I guess? You know, do they have equipment now? I don't know. To start like today, if we started today digitizing, at least in 20 years, we'd have 20 years, or, I don't know, it was just
There'd be a discussion
something
with
to,
archives.
I don't know.
Look into it.
Yeah.
I try not to add any expenses that aren't necessary to the budget.
Oh, I understand, I hear people.
So
I
I'll be
mean,
happy to talk to them about it.
I just wonder if we, you know, and we could say, you know, we're gonna plan it for 5 years away, or it came up and I didn't know what other cities are doing and or other counties and what we're doing.
My idea to report back on revenue replacements, you really got a couple of things. If you look at that roof, you know, for the roof.
I
for
think the
jail.
roof, it's right on our,
And then number two, there are always patrol cars and ambulances bought each year, so patrol cars and ambulances,
Add the ARPA
those
later.
three together should get rid of revenue replacement, should be gone. It's no longer a concern. If you budget, or do we figure out where we're at on the revenue replacement? You budget the roof, and then whatever's left, you budget for ambulance and patrol cars versus in your capital, it should finish that category out.
and the reason I brought up the library is the current library software that they have, it's outdated, and I started having a conversation with Robert Tuttle about it. He says there's security issues in it. And I don't know, I haven't approached him completely with it. I don't know if our citizens' information in there can be hacked or not. The libraries need new system, and it's coming, and
That could
we've
be
got to
something you
address
fund
it.
out of revenue replacement.
Exactly.
Is
If
it
you do
need-
these three right here, you've already got your revenue.
Have we already
replacement.
went through it? Yeah.
If you do the roof, it's gonna be because you got a million, but
I
if you
think
leave
we
that million
should-
in capital and we take it out of here, it's gonna be $1 million.
I'm all for
Plus,
it. We're already
these are-
spending that money. That's
So that
ideal.
would get rid of your revenue replacement right off. Plus, if you're gonna add back that, EMS station, that would more than cover all that.
All
So-
of it.
So if you add the EMS station back in the roof, it's gonna take most of it, and whatever little's left, you could take on patrol and ambulances, it'll get rid of your revenue replacement. Then it leaves you back just with your general or proper, which is the more restricted, and that's, the discussion was to take the one, which one? The $2 million one at White House, it's for COVID treatment, would
No.
bring it back down to $2 million.
The Westmoreland is for COVID treatment.
Well, how much is it? Is it the $2 million one? I'm sorry, I said it back.
It's supposed to be, but I think the way it's in the budget, it's flipped.
Backwards, okay.
Yeah.
So it should be $2 million for Westmoreland, and it's the revenue, the general one, and it's actually the,
And I will be,
revenue
I'll just
replacement.
caution you, between two facilities, I don't think that's enough money to build both of them. So,
So
that was,
so the question comes back, which one's not gonna have enough, the one coming out of general or revenue replacement, we think?
well, until we hire an architect, and that everything's kind of been on hold, so we've really gotta get moving. I hope in March, we can get the authority to move forward again, so then we can put out an RFQ to get an architect hired.
And I like the EMSs and where we need them. That's why this whole conversation started, was the time constraints and how much money we need. And that's why I was recommending putting it back in, not the proper ARPA, but back in our general fund so that we can handle it. And I agree with you, to build two facilities, $2 million wouldn't cover it, especially as costs are zooming.
So under the proper, we're showing 5.1, there's about 400,000 that went out one day. If we're talking over 2 million on that, that's gonna leave you somewhere below 2.5. And then what they told you right now is basically any of those allowable expense, including if you can't find one allowable, you still got water lines, broadband, but
Yeah.
there are times they kind of run out because they gotta be contracted. But you can hire this group if you wanted to run something more complicated, and you could actually maybe put it under the control of your giving committee of what they wanted to give it to that was allowable. Because you've got a full-blown giving committee the county does right now. What's it called? The Charitable Giving
Yeah,
Committee.
Jerry Becker heads it.
So you could really set it with this group and eliminate the rest of your general or your proper. As a possibility.
My
And then-
recommendation would be if y'all decide to put the EMS stations back on, we go ahead and move forward with our RFQ, which that takes about a 3 to 4 week process to advertise that and get an architect on board. And then we have a kickoff meeting with them and just meet with EMS and them to determine what the needs are for the two stations, the square footage, and what additional, as been mentioned, for the COVID, to qualify as the COVID, you do have to have additional requirements in the capital expenditure test. which we've already done a part of that. But once we know the square footage and what's required for the COVID requirements, we can finalize that narrative for the Westmoreland station. But then from there, we can get an approximate cost from the architect for the 2 stations. And then you would kind of know where you are on the general side. And then from there, you could formulate what other additional programming you may need.
But that's another one of my points. If we move it back to our general fund and out of this ARPA, we don't have to build in a COVID disinfectant
Well,
center.
You're gonna run into this though, we're gonna spend that out, and you don't wanna spend it out of your general, that's your operating, but you need capital.
Capital,
You're gonna
I'm
eat up
sorry,
your
yes, that-
capital, and then you're gonna have even more money over this $5 million in this very limited, proper. So if you don't do that,
we
you're
keep
gonna
the
have,
COVID, okay.
yeah, you know, Sean, so you're gonna have all this proper money that can be used for very few things, such as you're gonna maybe have to start a large program over here, or something the county generally wouldn't do. So you're gonna move all that expense back over into your capital projects or general. You're gonna
And the
have to fund
Westmoreland
all of it.
station does need to be replaced. There's great need there.
And-
But like you mentioned, whether you fund it from ARPA or
And
or
we're
regular
using it for
capital.
COVID, but think if there's other outbreaks or something, I hate to say that, but you can still use it for other things, or emergencies, tornadoes, you know, it can be used for other stuff too, that COVID section can. But this is my thought, I mean, you guys are the commissioners, so you will really be the ones determining, but that's kind of my thought, you may want to leave it there, because otherwise you're going to be taking out of less restricted funds, completely unrestricted funds.
And like our paramedics mentioned, we'll be tracking these projects throughout this fiscal year or calendar year. And if it comes September and we feel like these aren't gonna move where they need to be, you
We can
can
switch
shift
them.
them and do the programming.
Yeah, and I would recommend you, if you're moving forth RFPs and everything this month, to go ahead and keep monitoring close to July, because as they're saying, if we want to open up big projects, that's the time. So if these things, for something, you run into some major issue, then you may want to try to move the thing all the way over into local, otherwise let it keep going down the road.
So how much, I'll schedule some time, I wanna look at the money in our capital projects fund. We'll
Right
look at
now, we
that.
think there's somewhere, and I wrote it down before I came up, but that's very, I think it's about 3 point somewhat million dollars. Let's just say 3.8, I think that's what I've got here, is a low estimate. You've got 3.8, but you got a couple of things out there. You got the large garage to finish.
The large garage at EMS?
No, your parking garage.
Oh,
You know, it's a large entity, you still need to finish that. And then I was thinking about this roof here, but if you're moving it to ARPA, that's gonna free that up, and that's gonna leave you some capital money. But you have several buildings that, as you're saying, you've got all these HVACs. This roof right here is still becoming more and more problematic. Even the rubber roof up there's got leaks all over the top now, so it's becoming more and more problematic over time. You've got the archive rail issue, I know about this issue here, and I think there's another issue, I don't remember.
Those are a couple that you could pick up under revenue replacement as well if you needed.
So I
yeah, I
think
think
really
we got
between
plenty of
this-
revenue replacement items that are just ongoing day-to-day things that we could just pick up, that we're gonna pay
Well,
no
I think
matter
there's
what.
3 revenue replacements out there, that roof, and patrol, and ambulance will finish your revenue replacement right off. So it's really got you back to the general revenues, as Kim's saying, if you run forward with your EMS stations, it's definitely going to eat up those other 2 items. So you've really spent all those except for your general,
And the
and
only-
you've got this option up here if you're running close to get them to.
Well, and then, like I said, I saw the veterans stand up at the Galton meeting. Perhaps it's been 12 months, but they definitely had a drainage issue and they were suffering over there. They have, maybe y'all are more familiar with it, they have the little hotel over by the
Okay, that's
BF.
over
And then
behind
they
Old
have,
Glory.
and then
Old
there's
Glory
an
Restaurant.
apartment building also,
Yeah,
I think
that's-
they're
that's
involved
behind Old
in.
Glory.
Is it, do you know if it's a nonprofit or what it is?
I don't know, next
Probably.
Tuesday, I'll be eating over there, I'll check out.
Because they're saying if it's a nonprofit and it qualifies because they're servicing, then it may qualify for general, we'd have to look at it.
It was a,
But I don't know if we
Drainage.
can go in and do
Oh, if it's not-
stormwater issues for the city.
the city said that it had nothing to do with them, they had no money for it, and they felt bad about it. That
Even
was, and they turned them away.
If it's not a nonprofit, we couldn't even do it under general
Yeah,
because
I
we
don't
can't work
know.
on private property.
It's just when they were bringing it up, I thought about those veterans standing there and saying they desperately needed help, and Mayor Brown was saying, I wish we could help you, but that's not, I can't remember why Gallatin City, it wasn't in there.
All right, I know the people over there, I'll call them.
There's 2 more items that has not been discussed.
And it was just that one meeting, it just,
Yeah,
if we could help them.
Two more items that hasn't been discussed that was on the resolution from Monday night. Let's start with number 5. There's $101,292 for ECC. That was only 32%. I was over at the meeting with the mayor at the Consolidated Dispatch, their meeting, and the mayors voiced their concerns that this was only 32%, that the county received most, if not all, of the Arpa funds, and they were requesting the county consider paying the whole ECC alert system out of Arpa for the Consolidated Dispatch. I think that was the gist.
Yeah.
What's the whole amount?
It would be, take that times 32,000, take that times by 32%, 3,300 some thousand.
And that was revenue replacement though.
That would be the one where you have already pretty much, you could do it in lieu of a patrol car if you're willing to do the whole thing. Their thought process was, since we received the ARPA funds, they're asking the county to pay all of it because it benefits everybody countywide, I think.
So, and I know the other day when I told you that Michael Guthrie told me he didn't know, that was 2 months ago. So now I assume, can you tell me what the alert system is? Because I did ask him, and at that time he didn't know. And I assume he does know now, you said? I'm just trying to find out what it is.
Before I venture out there, I would have to get a narrative on it so I'm accurate in the way I describe it. But it's an alert system for fire and EMS. So I can get the full narrative for the next meeting. I didn't pursue it when it was withdrawn, so I didn't pursue the program.
Can we just ask
But I
Mr.
can get
Guthrie
it.
to send it that way the mayor wouldn't have to do it?
Yeah, and that was
We just
my,
match him to send what it is to her, and then we can put it in the committee.
yeah, that was my only concern is I just
save the
didn't know
mayor
what
from
it
having
was and couldn't get, and like I said, I approached him here in this room before a meeting and I asked him, and at that point, he didn't know. And I know you said he does know now, so, or maybe it was just the verbiage.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh,
I
okay.
said I didn't know exactly.
Anyways, if we could just find out what it is, that would make it easier to discuss.
And then item number 2 was the $1.5 million for the maintenance facility, and I think there's been a lot of discussion. You know, there's the issues with the lack of a maintenance area, but there's no idea of where it's going right now, so.
We
And the mayor
absolutely
may
have
wanna
to do
give you more
something.
details of what we need right now, because I think it's a little different than most people understand what's needed right at this current juncture.
But that would be under revenue replacement.
It would have to be, or just out of our regular capital fund.
I think it's just gonna, if we.
The regular
with-
capital revenue replacement.
Without
can kinda be-
making it like muddy in the water, if we have expenses, the whole purpose of this is if we have existing expenses, use them. And then take care of all the rest of this later, all these difficult conversations and how to and what for. Like the maintenance facility, if we're gonna use the money up on roofs and ambulances and stuff, we're gonna spend anyways, why do we go through all of this to have these
There's
conversations?
knowledge. You just need to
We just
decide
move it.
if you're gonna fund it, you need to decide, do you wanna fund it from capital or revenue replacement? My point is, if you follow the federal procurement, you probably wanna use your revenue replacement first to get it out here, because your capital money is local revenues and it has no.
No
time
restrictions,
frame.
yeah,
No
I understand.
time frame on it. So you're really down to your big concern once you talk, you're down to this general, what you wanna do with it. But I'm just bringing these up because they were on the resolution Monday to originally be expanded, and there's been no conclusion on what's gonna happen to the maintenance facility. And when I talked to the mayor the other day, I think it's a little different than most people understand, so he may just wanna kinda tell you where we're at with it.
I apologize, I wasn't tracking.
The maintenance facility, you know, we never been able to.
So the maintenance facility started at $4+ million back when y'all first took office. And then I came with the option of using the back part of the Union School building, Union School Road building, for maintenance, and that would cut the project, that would rescope the project down to $1.5 million. And just build a facility that would be catered just to EMS personnel over in that space. To rehab the Union School building for them would be $100,000 maybe. We kind of backed off on that due to the court cases and all that, and hadn't done anything more on it. But the 1.5 is supposed to be the pared down maintenance facility at the EMS building. Because they do need to expand things there. So that's, it doesn't have anything to do with our maintenance crew.
So,
So who's gonna be using the Union School building?
Well, yeah, that's all up in the air right now.
Yeah,
That's
we
why,
shouldn't
that's
worry
why I
about that.
backed off of the maintenance crew
So,
going there. I know that here's the reality, we're under an OSHA violation now with the maintenance crew being here, so we're gonna have to make a decision on putting them somewhere.
I totally agree. We must have been under OSHA violations for a decade by the way things look,
Been there for a little while, but
for a moment.
but nevertheless, you know, it's, we need to figure out something.
So that's not a maintenance, so it's an EMS maintenance facility.
So this,
yeah,
this
that has nothing to
item
do with
number
our
2
maintenance.
is EMS, has nothing to do with our maintenance. Our maintenance needs priority.
No, they both need equal priority. I mean, we can do them simultaneously, we don't have to do one over the other.
Will the EMS maintenance facility be an addition to their building or another building?
It would be another building, is the way we were looking at it.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And there may be a way that we can build for both of them over there if we rescope it, increase the scope a little bit. Maybe not do a $4.5 million project, but do a $2.5 million project. You know, there may be a way to rescope that a little bit. So, and I think that would solve both problems.
So we put it up there on Airport Road?
Yep. Yeah, it'd have to go up there at the EMS facility.
So, in charge of the subcommittee, since it's a one-time subcommittee, what would the group like to pass back as the information to the budget committee? My thought is update this which is sheets on your table for the sheriff stuff Monday. Probably send back the resolution here because they're still.
One thing, I didn't see the 2,400 that we spent on the health department for the hazardous materials survey.
It's probably in the expense total it'll change between expense and your budget if it's
I
not.
didn't see it on the open PO, because it just has 825, which was the part for, the survey.
Okay, but if it was after the report,
It might have been.
it'll just flow between the unencumbered, so it won't make a difference over on the far right, so that's
Okay.
fine. We'll re-update it again if need be, but, so that kind of thing is add in the sheriff's departments under the general revenue, the 2 items that was approved Monday.
Are those general? I thought those were,
They're general because they meet the one for prevention of violence, and they're expanded.
I just wasn't sure when Ben was talking if both of them, if he said so, that's fine. At first, I wasn't sure if he said both of them or one of, so it's all good. I'm happy about using proper.
What we were discussing, one of them is the sole provider, so we
Yeah.
can use that. The other we're gonna have to bid, so the amount the sheriff gave you is probably okay, but until we get the bid back, we may have to ask for a tiny bit more money or maybe a little extra.
Yeah.
Don't know where the bid's gonna
Yeah,
come back.
I like
That
it.
was the best estimate based on
But
quotes.
we've written up the narrative, so both of them do, because whenever
both
you
of them
do
work
qualify
perfect.
under the general, you have to write up a narrative to why it qualifies, so we've done that piece of it.
Excellent.
So we need to report this, the resolution back, that right now, as far as we understand, that there would be enough time to move forward with the 2 EMS facilities, or is everybody kind of feeling that consensus or not? Based on
I would rather see us use it and then move them to capital and fund them in other ways, because we have so many conversations still to have with the 2 MS stations.
So you've got the 3.9 right now. This is, like, if we look at the revenue replacement, there's 3.9. What do we think the roof, maybe 1.7, 1.6?
1.7 was what the estimate was for the
So
jail
1.7 would put that down to about 1.2, and if we buy patrol cars and ambulances, that would clean that out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could move the smaller of the 2, which is the 1.
Well, we have to move the one with the COVID
Westmoreland.
station.
You need the 2 million
It's
because
the,
you're
The
gonna.
one-
it has to be that special station to get into the proper, right?
So the 1.539, you can move over to just plain capital projects. Is it possible if they're willing to do that? Or just go ahead and move the Westmoreland
Like I
appropriation,
mentioned-
regular capital?
You really need.
No,
to
the
meet-
Westmoreland is the COVID.
Oh, I'm sorry, the one is 1.539, which is White House, they were
You-
labeled wrong.
You really need to meet with the architect and get a budget before y'all shift funds from general.
I
Because you
got
may
you.
need a little more than what's been allocated.
But my point is, if they're worried about the timeframes in the 3.9, you could come in and hit it with the 1.7 and then patrol and ambulance clean it out. move whatever the amount ended up being for the Westmoreland facility over into your regular capital projects fund, then we're under no guns at all for it. It's local revenue, you gotta appropriate it.
We can discuss it.
Well, I mean, if they're willing to appropriate it, they can move it under regular general capital with the discussion.
And then we've still got the timing constraints on it.
Well, not
You
for that
have-
one if you move it. That one would remove your timing constraints.
Oh,
For the White House one.
the White House one,
For the
yeah.
White House. The other one still has the time constraints, but as I'm saying, if
If there's
you're
enough time, if you,
going to do it
if the
though,
committee
Y'all make a
approves,
decision now,
If-
we can get it done.
So
is it
we
gonna
can discuss it at budget?
If you make a decision in March, there's enough time that I can have everything ready that following Monday after the commission meeting. We can advertise that Thursday. Have the RFQ open for 3 weeks, have that back. We can make the selection within a week, move forward with that architectural contract, within the $2 million that y'all got obligated. And then we have a kickoff meeting with the architectural team and EMS to fully vet what their needs are. And then they should be able to get back with us on what's the typical square footage cost that they're seeing right now in this market. And then from there, we verify, is that 2 million gonna be enough?
but that's under revenue replacement, so there's, you know.
And then we also have.
So,
to-
yeah, but we're gonna spend revenue
No,
replacement.
the
We're talking
West-
about proper.
I'm
here.
sorry,
West-
proper, I
Yeah,
said
the
Yeah.
Westmoreland one is the general, so.
Yeah, I understand. So, yeah, let's talk about all the options at budget.
But if we get beyond that, then.
But I still have
What-
concerns about it.
What prevents us when we bid it, make sure I'm not looking at it wrong? We bid it, say you guys wanna go ahead and move forward. The one just to say you move it over to the capital, you don't have to worry, but you still got the one that's gonna come out of just the general revenue or the proper. You're worried about the time constraints. When you bid it, you can bid, and it may cost you a little more money, you can bid that vendor has to be done by a certain time.
Yeah, I mean, you
Bid, you gotta be
will,
done here and receive your last payment by this time, period.
that'll be in the period of performance.
I understand what you're
because
saying.
It's tied to ARPA.
We have a tied contract and make them bond if they're gonna stick to that performance period. If they don't, it's their peril.
But yeah, it's a lot of good stuff to discuss at budget with the
Because you got that,
budget
if we
committee.
put in that contract, you gotta be finished by then, or any losses incurred by the county is your responsibility. That means they don't finish, and we don't get the last payment out to them, they pretty much eat it. So that would get all that pressure back. It may cost you a little more, but you'll get that pressure back off of you. The only question is, would somebody bid it? Probably, who knows for sure. If you put that in, somebody may not bid it, but they probably
Yeah.
will.
Well, it's already gonna have the period
There's a
of
lot of
performance
probablys.
ARPA language that they've gotta be done, so it's part of the
So,
subrecipient contract terms.
I think there's a lot of good stuff to take to budget, and they can
But
decide.
I think the gist is you gotta move with haste right now if you're gonna continue down the Arpa Road on the building.
Yes, that all needs, and that was my whole concern with this, the whole start of this conversation is the timeline. Is that the last item?
Yeah, does anybody else have
I think
anything?
there's still enough time to finish it, but we gotta make a decision in March to be able to move forward.
Anybody else have anything? Then we'll need a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.